on this computer. Boom. All right. So I'm super excited to introduce you all to Guy. If you've never met him, I love talking about him because I'm always like, yeah, I was talking to this guy. His name's Guy. And that's literally how I talk about him all the time when I talk about him, because it's just fun to do that. But I met Guy at Commercial Academy, probably almost 2 years ago already. And then we hung out a lot at Ignite in 2019. And he's just super knowledgeable. He's been investing for over 10 years. He's been part of Fortune Builders, coached for Fortune Builders, has really put together an awesome group and team that he works with. And they primarily invest in storage units and do the syndication method that we learned a little bit about with TJ, but on storage units. So I thought it would be really awesome for him to come in and meet everybody. So thank you, Guy, for agreeing to do this. I've made the option available for you to share your screen. So at any point, if you have something you want to share, you can. I will ask everyone to keep themselves muted if they're not talking, just so we don't get a bunch of background noise. And so with that, Guy, take it away. Introduce yourself a little bit more for anyone who doesn't know your story.
Okay, perfect. Well, I appreciate you having me on. I'll share some about kind of my background, where I came from, how I got to where I'm at, and feel free to unmute yourself at any time if you've got a question. Definitely want to make this interactive, and the whole purpose is for me to add value to wherever you're at, right? I mean, take it one more step into the future, right? I mean, otherwise we just sit there and do the same thing and play the same story and record the same tapes in our brain, and we get the same results year after year, and if you want different results, you got to take different actions, and part of that is changing your mindset, right? So I 2010, I heard about that thing where you could learn how to buy houses without any money, and ended up looking it up online, and actually Fortune Builders didn't have the radio advertising at the time. And so saw that they had a manual. Like, we were watching the Flip This House, and Paul brings JD on and hands him this rehab manual. And I looked at my wife and I said, I need that manual. Not a manual like that. I need that manual right there. And so that's how I found Fortune Builders. I bought a couple of houses, didn't know anything that I was doing, lost money on both those houses. So yeah, let's not do that, right? That's not a good thing to do. So yeah, got on the phone with them and found out that I had a program, and so I bought their program and did all right with it, right? And did good enough where Bob LaChance asked me if I would coach, and so I coached with Fortune Builders. Everyone coaches on a part-time basis for about 6 or 7 years, right? So I mean, Marie, how many Fortune Builders people do we have on the call today?
Almost everybody.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd say 90%.
Okay. Well, good. And I think it was Wendy who had the Celebrate All Wins t-shirt on. Is that right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. I mean, yep, there you go. My kids have that. And I tell you what, that was an important part of my kids are teenagers now, right? And I remember my son was probably 10 at the time. I said, hey, you want to go to dinner? And he goes, oh, let me guess. We bought another house. I'm like, no. He said, oh, okay. We sold another house. I'm like, no, let's just go to dinner, right? Because we had celebrated all of those wins, like every time we had an accomplishment, and we taught our children that you celebrate the wins in life. Like, I mean, that's a perfect thing to do. And I got that from Fortune Builders. And what I tell everybody is that I bought a duplicatable business model, but what I got was a life transforming process. Like, I had to change to become good as a real estate investor. Right? I had to change. The technique is there, right? Like earlier we were talking a little bit about like calling, an inherited property, right? Very concerning. I hated that list. I mean, I did that list for years, made more money on that list than any other list out there, right? Hated it, got yelled at more, talked to police, talked to judges, I mean, everybody and their brother, right? Because it's such an emotional list, right? Once I realized that the people that I could help weren't going to get helped by anybody else, right? And the people who were mad at me, they weren't mad at me. They lost somebody they loved. They weren't angry at me. I was just a point at which they could release some of their tension. I was willing to be of service to them in that arena. Once I decided, hey, this is not about me. This is about you being authentic in your emotion, and you're frustrated, and that's where you're at. Boom, I let it go. It no longer owned me. I no longer had the relationship with that emotion that was connected in with it, because it was so tied up inside when that was happening to me. So we don't really do any flipping anymore. We do a little bit, but it's more, we finance deals for rehabbers in our areas, and we joint venture with them and that kind of stuff. And I won't get into the structure in that, but I use that. Yeah, I use that joint venture agreement that Fortune Builders has, right? It's on the mastery site. It's a joint venture agreement on how to do it. And I just took it here. I'm in Iowa. I just took it to my local attorney and said, hey, make sure this is compliant with our laws here. You know, it cost me a couple $100, and bam, I had a joint venture agreement that I could go ahead and start doing deals with investors. And I built a business that way. I wasn't financing deals for rehabbers. I was a rehabber. I found people to refinance my deals for me. So I did, I don't know, 60, 70 deals with no money at all, zero, like 100% financing. We had 80% bank debt on the purchase and 90% bank debt on the rehab. So the investor only had to come up with a little bit of money, and they got phenomenal rates of return. And I got to do as many deals as I wanted to, right? So, I mean, it's there, right? The tools are there. Just learning how to implement them for yourself is a pretty big deal. So anyway, so we bought, bought the Fortune Builders process. I was trying to learn how to rehab. Went to a rehab boot camp, and went to a wholesaling boot camp, and did the property tours and all the stuff that we've all been through. And I had to have a come to Jesus meeting with myself. And it was at the house just a couple blocks away from where I live now. We were living there. And I looked myself in the mirror and I said, man, you got to grow up or go get a job. You either have to take seriously being a real estate investor, or just realize you're playing at it. You're not going to be serious about it. It's okay. If you're not going to be serious about it, that's fine, but just don't pretend anymore. And so that was a turning point for me. And I had to create some rules. And I'll tell you these rules, and if you find that they apply to you, great. And then I'll tell you the result of those rules. First one was this. If the phone rings, answer it. Like, because that phone ring, and I'd be like, oh no, let it go to voicemail. I don't want to answer that call because it could be conflict, right? I saw it all as conflict. So they'd leave a message, right? So I'd answer, I'd listened to the voicemail, got the address, 6 hours desktop analysis, right? Come up with all the reasons why they wouldn't want to sell me the house at the price that I wanted to buy it at, so I wouldn't call them back, right? So I had to change some things about me. So I came up with a second rule. Don't delete the message until after you've spoken to them, because I wrote down the numbers wrong a few times, right? It just was, that was the deal. So the third one is if I go and visit the site, you've done 95% of work, you better put in the offer. You have to put in the offer. If you don't put in the offer, you just wasted your time, like all of it. And there's a saying that Dan and Paul say, which is, time isn't money, time is everything. And the reality is when you get really good at this, what you become good at is vetting people. you're looking for motivated sellers. That's it, right? Because if the motivation of the seller is that they get the highest price and the most profit, and if your motivation is that you get the lowest price so you can get the most profit, those two, they don't match. There's not a deal to be made there. It's not a win for both of you, right? So you have to be able to vet and understand what their motivation is. And what you'll find is with an out-of-state owner, right? And especially if it's a hoarder house, their motivation is not money. Yeah, they want money, right? But what I learned is when there's 3 people who are receiving it, and I tell them I want a $90,000 discount, they don't hear $90,000. They individually hear $30,000. They don't hear 90. I hear 90. They hear 30, 30, and 30. And one of them has got enough equity. They want the most money, or they've got enough equity in their life. They just want to be done with the damn thing. Right? Okay. So like when you're dealing with multiple inherited people, they hear only from their perspective. And usually one of them is dying for cash and they need it yesterday and they've already spent it 5 times in their mind, right? So when you say, hey, I want a discount of $90,000, what they're really hearing is it's going to cut me out by 30 grand and I could deal with that, right? Like, so you have these interpersonal dynamics that are going on. And I'm dealing right now with that in a self-storage facility, right? Except we're buying it for 700,000, right? 800,000, 900,000. And so when we cut that number, they have to still deal with all of those things. The difference between commercial and residential, we'll kind of get into that a little bit later. So you go, you look at the property, put in the offer. And here's the sticking point for me. This was the hardest part. If I'm not embarrassed by my offer, I need to drop the price. And that for me was very critical because somehow or another in my brain, I connected me being okay with the world around me, me being okay with people that I didn't know, me being okay with everything else, with a number, like this price I was giving them. And I had all these emotions and beliefs tied up in that. And I got to finally realize that not everybody thinks like me. And not everybody makes decisions the same way I do. So when I got pretty authentic with myself and said, hey, I'd like to do this deal. I need to make at least this much money. And I know that there's going to be some things that I don't really understand. So I have to make it even a bigger number to catch all my screw ups. And once I got it to be that big, I'm like, there's no way they would accept it. There's no way they would accept that number, right? Because that was my belief. But when I committed to doing these steps, putting in the offer and dropping the price until I was too embarrassed, like I would get to the point where I'm like, I can't offer that. I can't offer that. So I'd bump it up a little bit. I'm like, okay, I'm super, super nervous about that, but I'm willing to offer that number. Never, maybe one time, did I have anybody be upset with me because I put an offer in on a house. Most of the time they'd be like, yeah, I figured it was going to be too low. I can't sell for that. Like I built it up so much in my brain, in all of my emotive state, that I brought to the table all of this stuff when the reality is I totally misread the entire event, right? So got to the point where I'm putting in offers that were very nervous for me. I didn't, I couldn't handle it. It was like all that stuff. But once I finally committed to doing all that, the phone rang, I picked it up, went, looked at the house, put in an offer. I was actually skiing in California, put in the offer. They said, no, I can't go there. They came back at my minimum allowable offer, right? So I was way below my maximum allowable offer, right? It was way below it. And they came in at my maximum. So we kind of met in between those two because they didn't really have a number either. But they figured, hey, they brought me up and I got them, significantly below my maximum allowable offer. While I was skiing in Big Bear, I come home, I had a buyer. So went back, contacted the buyer. They wanted to see the house. So I got them, not the seller, but the seller's nephew, because they were out-of-state owners, to let them in. My buyer went in and saw the house, looked at it. I negotiated the deal with them. Boom, we closed. I owned it 5 hours. I did a double closing and made $65,000, right? I figured, hey, I can do this. Like, that didn't suck at all because I followed those rules that I had committed to for myself. It was not easy. It was absolutely something that I needed to change inside me. And you guys were talking a little bit before we started this recording, and it was realizing that you're offering people a service, right? And some people, they don't want your service. They don't want you to be nice. They want you to be ruthless. They want you to, because they're going to cut your jugular just right back, right? That's who they are. That's not me. I don't do business with those people. It's hard for me to work with those kind of people. So when I run up against them, I'm like, yeah, it's not worth my time. It's just not it's not who I am. So I just move on, right? But others who really don't see the value of the service, like I had one person say, look, I said, look, I got to make money doing this. He's like, yeah, but you don't got to make too much money. I said, no, that's fine. I'm not the buyer for you then. Like, go find another buyer who wants to make less money. I'm okay with that, right? Because there's things I want to do in life. I want to raise my kids. I want to go traveling. I want to do certain things, and that's going to take money. So I'm going to do that. And I had to be okay with that. And it was very hard for me. It was hard for me to negotiate that emotionally. So I tell you that story because I don't want you to think that as we get into the rest of what we're talking about, I don't want you to think that it's not something you can't do, right? Everything that I'm going to talk about later on today, every single one of you can do. You might not, and you probably won't, but you can. You might have to change, right? You might have to become a different person, and not a bad person, just a different one. And you might have to become a little bit more educated at some things. What we do, it's the easiest thing in the world. Real estate is like easy, right? I would much rather do what we're doing today than own like a franchise, like a McDonald's franchise or Subway or something like that. Man, that's complicated, right? So, I mean, it's pretty straightforward what we do. There's a lot of screwballs out there, and contractors are like adult babysitting, right? It's a huge pain in the ass, right? I mean, you know what it is, and that's okay. I mean, when you find a great one, don't nickel and dime them to death, right? Help them raise their family. Ask them, what do you want, right? Ask them what they want. And whenever you're working on putting together a deal for them, always connect that deal to what they want 100% of the time. Because if you're only ever talking about money, then it's just about money, right? And so that was one of the things that I learned when I was negotiating a lot across the table with sellers and I'll tell you about this one seller. I said, why are you selling your house? Well, my husband died, and my sister's dying, and I want to move to the state that she's dying in, and I want to spend the last 2 years of her life with her. I'm like, well, how come you didn't sell it on the open market? All kinds of problems to the house. She goes, you're the 11th investor that I'm talking to, right? So then all kinds of investors already talked to her. So I wasn't like the first to the table. But I knew what she wanted. She wanted to go and live with her sister. And so every time that we talked, I always brought it to that point. Like, in order for me to help you go live with your sister, I can buy this house for this much money. That's the connection. Not your house is a horrible thing. Not your house is a piece of crap. Not your husband was a horrible man for making you live in this thing. Like, none of that stuff, right? I mean, don't say that stuff, right? But that's what gets communicated when you say your house is a broken down piece, POS, right? So you just understand that it's not about the house, it's about helping them get to where they want to go. This is exactly the same conversation you have at a higher level, right? It's a lot more sophisticated, and you have a lot more professionals involved, and the sharks in the commercial waters are bigger, right? They're predatory, and they got a lot of money. And so you gotta know the waters a little bit better, but it's, you know, it's nothing different in dealing with the issues that that people are dealing with. So when you understand what people want, then you can help them. And it was in 2015 where I started to test. You know, you hear those cliches or sayings like the early bird gets the worm, or the one is you can have, if you help enough people get what they want, you can have everything that you want, right? Have you guys heard that? If you help enough people get what you want, you can have everything that, if you can help enough people get what they want, you can have everything that you want. Have you heard that? Yes, no?
Yes.
Yeah, so, yeah, okay. Yeah, so it's a saying, and there's a number of, you know, people that it's attributed to, but I started to ask people. I said, well, let's test it. Early bird gets the worm. Start getting up at 4 o'clock and see how that works. Just do it. Do it for a month. Get up at 4 o'clock and see what happens. Right? I don't know, right? I mean, like, do whatever, like, take a cliche that you know, a workism, a lifeism, or something that you hear people say all the time, and apply it and just see how it changes your life. And so I started asking people what they wanted. And I'll tell you, most people don't know what they want. They don't. I want $1 million. Great. Hey, tell me, if you had $1 million, what would that do for you? I don't know. I mean, like, literally, they don't know. And when you start to ask people that, it makes you ask yourself, what do you want? And if it's just money, right, then I need you to reevaluate that, right? Because money's just the thing that helps you accomplish what it is you want. And you know, a lot of people say, hey, I want more time with my family. And I'm like, I don't want more time with my family. I got enough time with my family, right? I want better time with my family, right? I want better time, not more time, right? I mean, I live in the house. We live in the house. We live in the kids. The kids are here. We spend time. My office is closed. Like, we have a lot of time with the family, but I want better time. What does that mean for you to have better time with your spouse or your family? What does that look like for you? And having coached, you know, thousands of people through Fortune Builders and asking this question, both from a professional perspective, but also from a personal perspective, it really comes down to two things. People want time freedom and money freedom, right? And the reality is, sell everything, move into a single wide in the desert, you're good. You got all the time freedom and money freedom you need. I mean, you're out of debt. You don't owe anybody anything, right? You're not running the rat race. I mean, it's done. You can have complete time freedom and money freedom in less than a year. You can just hammer it out. But the reality is they want time freedom, money freedom, and a bunch of other niceties. Right? Like, we like things. Like, things are nice, right? I like to have a house. I like to, you know, like that kind of stuff. And so if you can't succinctly determine what it is that you want, if you haven't written that down, and if you don't look at that every day, that's where you got to start. Right? And it's got to be real to you. It's got to be real to you. Right? Make it personal. Make it almost embarrassingly personal, so you really don't want to share it with anybody else. Because that's when you know it's real to your heart. You know, that's the thing that's going to get you up at 4 o'clock in the morning. That's the thing that's going to cause you to realize that you're a person of service to the world around you. You're willing to step out there and take it on the chin because you're the person who's going to step up and make a difference in the community that you live in. Right? That's your value, whatever that is, right? And all of the emotion and all of the fear and all of that stuff goes away because you have identified what you're about, who you are, and why you're doing what you're doing. And if you haven't done that yet, you got to go there. You got to start there. Okay. So, because we're going to talk about money, right? We're going to talk about all other kinds of great things. So, Iowa. So I used to live in California. California market's super crazy. You guys have an okay, crazy kind of market. Iowa, not crazy. Like the least amount of money ever I paid for a house is $10,000, right? I mean, the most I paid for a house here is probably 180, right? Maybe we paid 210 or something like that. But our price ranges are very, very low comparatively. But our median income is it's about the same as it is in San Diego, right? So the median home price here is about 190. Median home price in San Diego is about 570, right? So we have the same median income, but the housing pricing difference, cost of living differences are huge. So coming from California to here, I didn't even know how to negotiate. We moved here 17 years ago. And so I get that there's a difference in markets, but the reality is that there's not a difference in people. We all have the same motivation. Like motivation is the key, right? If you can understand the motivation of the person that you're speaking with and why they're looking to sell their house, you can come up with a solution. And that solution, some of the times, might not be you. And the quicker you identify that you are the solution or you are not the solution, gives you the more time freedom to move on to find the people you can actually help, right? And if you can't determine that yet, you'll figure that out, right? It takes, you gotta talk to a lot of people. So we started buying some rental properties, found some pretty good deals, made some good cash flow. I came up with some numbers. I said I want a 48% cash on cash rate of return in my rental properties. I said I want to have, in our area, it was a couple $100 a door, right? I wanted positive cash flow, $200 a door. So I had to identify what those were. I wrote them down. I put them on an index card. I put them on the wall. I looked at that. When you identify what it is you're looking for, you will find it. It's out there already, but you aren't seeing it because you don't even know what you're looking for. It's like when you finally decide on the car that you want to buy, the color, the model, the make, and all that stuff, finally you see them all over the place. They've always been there, but you never noticed them because you never focused on it. Same thing in this business. When you identify, right, what it is that you're looking for, you will start to see it. You will start to identify it. You'll become the expert in it. And so there's a number of investors that I know who only do a specific kind of house in their area, right? They're in a larger MSA. They'll only do a specific kind of house. They can rehab that house. If it's a full gut, I mean, gut completely in 5 weeks, right? If it's not a full gut, they're done in 3 weeks because they've done it again and again and again and again and again and again and again, right? They get a crew of 3 or 4 people in there, bam, 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 done. Next, on the market, right? They from the day they buy it to the time they get it sold, they even pre-sell them sometimes because they've done so many of them. So like, here's the pictures of what it's going to look like. Here's the last 18 that we did that looked exactly like this one, right? Very, very simple because they knew how to do what they were doing it. As a rehabber, I was never that good. Was never that good. Never had that kind of process down. So we talked about knowing what you want, talked about writing it down and identifying it. And we do this with our kids every year, right? They come up with some goals. We write it down. We make them look at it every day, right? They look at it every day and they accomplish their goals, right? And we started this when they were very young. We would come up with new rules for summertime, like when they were young kids and like 8, 9, and 10 type of thing. One year, my son goes, "Oh yeah. The rule for this summer is no biting," right? So like we had no biting was one of the rules. And so they came up with their own consequences for the rules as well, right? And so same kind of concept here. You get to come up with your own rules. You come up with your own consequences. And I challenge you to give yourself a work report weekly, right? If you were my employee and you performed at the level that you performed this last week, would I fire you? Would I say, all right, yeah, you did okay, you did what you said you're going to do? Or would I say, hey, man, you get a bonus, right? I challenge you to give yourself a weekly review. And I tell you what, I got fired a lot. I fired myself a lot because, man, I sucked at this for a while. I really did. And And it sucks. You're like, wow. I mean, that's, after I fired myself a number of times, that's when I had my come to Jesus meeting, right? I look myself in the mirror, say, man, you got to grow up or go get a job, right? So challenge you to figure out why you're doing what you're doing, what it is that you're going to do about it. Make sure you've got written goals and that you review it every day. Implement and have consequences, right? Have consequences. Because I mean, the reality is when we're our own employer, we think we can do whatever we want. And the reality is, no, you can't. You got to work, right? And I'll tell you, I don't tell a lot of stories with students, but I had one student. He just took an early retirement, had like 80,000, 120 grand or something like that, that he had to invest into deals. And, for the whole year, he just didn't do anything, right? It took him about a year. And so at the end of that year, he's like, man, I took a job again. And he goes, this is my last couple of calls. And so I asked him, I said, what were you expecting? He said, blah, blah, blah. And I said, so it sounded to me like what you were expecting is to go from work to play. And what it ended up being was going from work to more work. You quit your work and then you got to go to work. And he said, oh my gosh, you're right. And so 2 weeks later, we got a call. He had 6 deals under contract while he started his new job, right? He was working full-time at his another job, and he did more in 2 weeks, had 6 deals under contract because he had a shift in his brain. The shift in his brain said, wow, I need to work at this, where I've been playing at this. And unfortunately, and I sort of take some responsibility in that I wasn't the right coach for him at the time that he started, but fortunately I was a good enough coach to help him get right to right his ship and get back on track. And the reality is we all make decisions every day. And so that you could be successful at this. You can be successful at real estate investing. And right now we talk about it in wholesaling. We talk about it as rehabbing. We talk about it as kind of Airbnb rentals, commercial, that kind of stuff. But the reality is there's a whole nother world out there. And we're all kind of, working on this level. And as you grow, things change. So,
Guy, I just want to tell everybody a quick thing. So, we were talking about my Grand Canyon hike and I was super, super sore, right? had my knee brace on all day yesterday, got a good night's sleep. And this morning, my mom looked at me and I was putting all my stuff together to leave the house. And she's like, you're going to work? And I'm like, if I still had a boss, I'd tell him, F you, I'm sleeping in another day. I said, but now I work for myself. I'm going into the office.
Right.
So.
Well, and I've been talking for a little while. So I mean, is there anything that I said so far before we get into the commercial side and self-storage and syndication, that kind of stuff? Anything I said so far that maybe you had a question about, that you want to comment on, something like that? Anything there for you guys?
I appreciate your candidness and your perspective. It's kind of like a little pep talk that I find helpful. So thank you for sharing.
You're welcome. Yeah, welcome.
Yeah, I needed to hear it today.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's been a rough couple of weeks, so I needed to hear that. Thank you.
Excuse me, I want to apologize for coming in late, but dinner started late. Thank you so much for what you were saying at the end, or why. And one question you mentioned that kind of hit home to me, to ask myself, can't even read my notes. What is it that I'm doing?
Yeah.
To me, that resonates personally, because there's so many excuses as to why not, or what we want, but being really specific what it really means. And to me, that was really motivating.
Okay.
And it's actually one of the questions I've been asking myself in the back of my head for the past, 2 or 3 months, is like, but listening to what you said was was really enlightening.
Right.
I guess it was meant to be to be for me to show up a little late, but I'm here because it was a question that my subconscious really needed to hear. But thanks.
Good. Okay. Perfect. Well, and just so as we move on a little bit more, I'll share a little bit more, and we'll kind of move on. And is John still on the call here?
No, he texted me that he had to jump off, so he said to let him know where the replay is located so he can listen
Perfect.
later.
Well, so I met John at Ignite 2018, 2009. I can't remember. Yeah, 19 probably. Yeah. And John does self-storage, right? John's a builder and a developer. And I mean, so you got somebody in your backyard who's got a lot of experience, right? We talked to him about, helping us out on a couple of deals. And so I think that eventually we'll end up doing deals in Arizona. We'll be working with John, right? And John seems like a pretty straight guy, pretty straightforward, pretty knowledgeable. And, when you find people that you can connect with, people that understand what you're about, then they can understand, you understand what they're about, kind of make sure that it's a good fit, and then you move forward with it, right?
Yeah, I'll take credit for that introduction, by the way.
Yeah.
I made it happen.
Yeah, she did. Marie made that happen. Right. I did. Right. It was 2019. I remember that. Yeah. So
Liz was taking us to the party and I saw John. I was like, oh, you have to talk to John. You guys both do self-storage. You got to talk to John.
Right. So, I mean, it's been interesting. So Marie had asked me to talk a little bit about why we do self-storage, right? So, so we did, had some residential properties, probably 50 doors, I want to say altogether. A door is in single family, multifamily, it's the number of rentable units that you have. So if you have a 48 unit multifamily, it's called a 48 door property, right? That's the way that it's looked at. And so we had a bunch of, a small portfolio, and we've been selling that off. As a matter of fact, I've been expecting an offer here on my 7 unit. Now's a great time to sell. I mean, it's a great time to sell. I love selling in this market, right? I bought when the market was crappy, and I get to sell when the market's great. I mean, it's wonderful, right? You guys are getting massive deals. You guys get a lot of activity. It's a tough market to buy today, right? I mean, if you're not experiencing that, then you're not looking, because that's the way it's going on. I joined a group called Collective Genius. It's a group of pretty mid-level, successful residential investors predominantly. So they'll do 150 to 400 flips a year. One of the guys got a company. They did 12,250 wholesale deals in 2019, I think. Right. So, I mean, they're business owners, right? It's all about systems. It's all about personnel. It's all about, making sure that you understand where things are going on and happening. And it's just all at a significantly higher level. And not having done a massive amount of flips, not having done a massive amount of wholesale deals, not having a large rental portfolio, it's kind of hard to run with those folks, because I'm used to being in a group where I can add value. Like, I can add value to a group, but I can't really help somebody who's doing 400 rehabs a year. What am I going to say? You're not doing it right, right? Or, if you're wholesaling 2,000 wholesale deals a year, okay, yeah. But if you have 1,500 rental properties, that's just not me, right? And so we do self-storage, and so that's sort of unique to the group. Unfortunately, though, one of the self-storage gurus in the country who's got a training course, he's in my room. So I'm like, if you want self-storage, talk to this guy. I mean, been doing it for 25 years. I eventually found my niche, and we're able to actually bring value to the group and value to people and that kind of stuff. And so we found a business consultant coach there. We implemented a business operating system called EOS. It's the Entrepreneurial Operating System. It's based off of a book called Traction. If it's just you, probably not worth it right now, right? But when you've got a team of people that you're working with, you need to have a system that of goal setting, a system of delegation, a system of follow-up, a system of accountability. You need to have all of these systems available. And so we hired them. They came in and helped us set up this process. And had we not done that, we probably would have imploded, because we're growing at such a significant rate that you're gonna always run out of money. You're always going to run out of time. You're always going to have conflicting personalities. You're going to have conflicting goals, conflicting priorities. And so it's critical that you have an agreed upon vision, agreed upon process, and an agreed upon conflict management. Otherwise, you get off topic, right? And you start to lose the momentum, and momentum is a big, big deal. So we had a small rental portfolio, helped one of our main investors, who's a partner in one of our main companies, do a lot of 1031 exchanges. So we did probably 8, 9, 10 1031 exchanges, and helped migrate out of farmland into residential and commercial properties. So that allowed us to kind of, get some cash and move and continue to grow that business. So all of you know that in the residential market, that houses are valued based on what the other houses in the area are selling for, the comps, right? I mean, that's what we think of. It's a comp. That's what it's worth. It's worth what somebody will pay for it, but you got to get the appraiser to kind of agree to the comp. And if the appraiser won't agree to it, you got to get the buyer to agree to pay the extra, right? I mean, that's kind of what it is. That's not how it works in the commercial world. Commercial world is all about cash flow. It's all about profitability, right? They do get comped in specific types of arenas or asset classes, but it's not based on what the next door neighbor sold for. Though the next door neighbor could be a very, very valuable valuable property to look at, right? So I'm going to talk a little bit right now about what's called cap rate, because cap rate is an industry standard. It's a pretty rudimentary financial metric. It's used all over the place. Multifamily, industrial, strip malls, in office, in self-storage, right? It's called the cap rate. And effectively, the cap rate is the interest rate that an investor would expect to get from their investment if they paid 100% cash for that investment. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, and I prepared a small Excel spreadsheet, and it's here, right? So can everybody, can you see the Excel spreadsheet? Okay, all right. I'm also going to go ahead and click this, and I'll put a little bit of yellow highlighter so that if you see my cursor, it'll move this way. So like if an investor were to invest.
Guy, before you go on, can you go to the bottom right and just enlarge that spreadsheet past the 100%, just so that it's a little bit more, those numbers are legible to everybody? Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Perfect. Good. All right. So like we're going to just talk about cap rate. And this is kind of important because it gets into why we do self-storage. Okay. Cap rate, again, is if somebody were to invest, let's say $1 million, okay? And they were to make $70,000 a year in income. If they paid 100% cash, and that property, be multifamily or office building or self-storage or industrial building, if it were to make $70,000 a year, well, we're like, okay, well, what they're getting is the $70,000 divided by the million. They're getting a 7% rate of return, right? Very, very basic. This does not include depreciation expense, doesn't include the impact on taxes. It doesn't include whether or not this is in an IRA or not an IRA. It doesn't include valuation increase in the asset. It doesn't include any of that other stuff. Just very, very simple rate of return, right? So that's what that is. So cap rate is kind of the inverse of that. It's, hey, if I've got, let's say for me to invest in the deal, I need to make 10% rate of return. Okay, that's what I need to make. Why? Because I'm greedy? No, because that's what I decided. It's my money, I get to make the decision, so that's what I decided, right? I mean, I told you I had a 48% cash on cash rate of return. That was my requirement, right? That's cash on cash, right? So I mean, you get to decide your own rate. Don't ask anybody else if it's an okay rate. Don't ever do that. You say, hey, this is what I want. Then you go look for it. And if you can't find it, then maybe it's not okay. But if you can find it all over the place, you're too low, right? I mean, you decide what it is that you want, okay? So let's say if I had $1 million and I was going to buy something cash and I wanted 10% rate of return, right? And this deal made $70,000, right? It made $70,000. So the question is how much could I pay to get $70,000 at a 10% rate of return? Well, I say, okay, well, I want to take this number divided by the 10% rate of return. I got to pay $700,000. They're like, well, I'm selling it for $1 million. I'm like, I need a 10% rate of return. I can only pay $700,000. Plain and simple. Like, well, I'm not going to sell it to you. Like, oh, okay, I'm not going to buy it from you. I mean, it's like, okay, you want to argue about this? I don't know. Like, you know, kind of a deal. But having negotiated enough houses, I know I can't start at 700. That's where I want to end up. That's my maximum allowable offer, right? I don't start there. Well, I got to start at 500,000. That's half what they're asking. Oh, I can't offer that. That's too embarrassing, right? I mean, it's the exact same thing in residential. The same mindset, same conversations. A bit different in commercial because it's all about business at this level, right? I mean, we do work with personal people and their baby, right? They built it 30 years ago. It made them a good amount of money over that time, and you're buying their baby. And so you got to be sensitive to that. But at the end of the day, I mean, if they're going to be with me for wanting to buy it for 700, I'm going to offer them for wanting to sell it at $1 million. So now we're both pissed. What does that do, right? Right? I mean, it's an arbitrary number. They think it's worth that much. I'm not willing to, whatever, right? I mean, it's very, very simple at this point in time. So again, this is the rate of return that an investor is expecting to get paid 100% cash. And the reason this cap rate is used is because it clears the board. It levels it. It says, what is the cash flow that this investment makes? And if it was 100% cash. So we take the cash flow, we take the profitability, we add back depreciation expense, we add back interest expense, we add back all the expenses that are not cash based and that are not interest based. Because at the end of the day, you may be able to get financed at 6%, but I can get financed at 3.5%, right? The value of the property should not be dependent on whether or not you can get the right loan rate or I get the right loan rate, right? So we take out the loan rate completely and it's not part of the discussion. We get rid of interest expense completely, right? And so I'm going to move to here. And I'm going to go ahead and I'll go ahead and zoom this in a little bit more now, right? So this is an example. if the facility makes $150,000 in gross rents, right? This would be a 300 unit facility, right? Something like that. And our operating expenses are $52,000. That's labor, that's insurance, property taxes, and all that kind of stuff. Multifamily, this is typically, 45, 50%, right? We can get this down. The lowest we've had this is 19%. And typically we don't ever really get above 30%, right? So we use 35% in our numbers. That's just what it is, right? Depends on the state. Illinois has massively high property taxes. So usually that's up a little bit higher, right? In other states, it's not. But typically higher property taxes gets wrapped into the value of the rents, right? If we get charged more property taxes, we just charge the customers more in rent. It's just the way it works, right? Because we got to make our return. That's just the way it is. So on this deal, it's about 70. We would say if we had a $800,000 loan on this, we'd probably be paying $72,000 a year in interest expense, right? And then we had depreciation expense, call it 20 grand a year. So this profit on this property is only $5,000, right? That's not worth it to me. $5,000, that sucks, right? If this was a $1 million facility, if we had to buy this for $1 million, that would be horrible. I wouldn't want to do that, right? It's just not a lot of profitability. Now, depreciation expense, it's not a cash expense, right? Do you guys familiar with depreciation expense? Do you guys understand that? Marie, have you guys talked about that at all? No? Okay. All right. It's a tax thing. It's an accounting thing, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
it's an
hasn't been
accounting thing.
necessarily a topic of conversation within the group. I'm sure some people understand it a little bit more than others if they have rental properties, but I do know that it's a different number of years for residential and commercial.
Yeah, yeah. So love depreciation expense. It's a huge, huge benefit, right? I have investors who tell me, Guy, if you'll sell me $2 million of depreciation expense for $1 million, I'll invest that $1 million in your next project. And hopefully you fail at it and I get to write off the $1 million as well. Because they're at 50% tax rate, right? They get $2 million in expense, they write off 2 million, they save $1 million in taxes. They got $1 million in my deal debt free. I mean, they basically have nothing in the deal. And if the deal fails, then they get to write off the $1 million as well. So it's like a $3 million expense for $1 million. It's wonderful for them, right? This is how people think when they start to look at depreciation expense. It's nothing to do with whether or not it's got a nice roof or a good neighborhood or pretty windows, right? It's a totally different financial model. So anyway, so this deal would make effectively $25,000 in cash flow, right? Is what it would do. But the interest expense is what's killing the deal. If an investor bought this 100% cash and had no debt, then they would make all of this profit, right? They would make almost $100,000 in profit. On $1 million investment, $100,000 in profit, that's a 10% rate of return. People say, sign me up all day long. Because in addition to that, I get the depreciation expense, plus this goes to a pass-through entity. I don't pay taxes on the first 20% of it, plus I get the value add opportunity and the growth in value and all that kind of stuff. This becomes a 25%, a 19 to 25% rate of return investment for them because of all of those other things, right, that are out there that we typically don't deal with when we're flipping houses or wholesaling, right? Because we're a very short-term mindset, right? In multifamily, industry, industrial parks, self-storage, all of this other stuff, it's a longer-term mindset. Like when we do a ground-up build, it's 5 years, right? It takes us 9 months to get the thing built, 3 years to go ahead and get it ramped up and stabilized, and then we got another year to get it sort of seasoned, and then we can sell it. So it's 5 years to turn that around. So we don't have a ton of time to mess around and do it wrong, right? So this gets to your question, is why we do self-storage, okay? So we're going to add back the interest and add back the depreciation. Here's the net operating income. And NOI, I mentioned earlier, is what we're all about. This is it. Anything I can do to increase NOI is valuable. It increases the value of the investment. Remember, cap rate is what the investor is expecting to get a return. And what the banker says, and what the other investors say, and what the appraisers say is, Guy, what are other self-storage facilities of a comparable quality and size? What are other investors paying? Right? And other investors are paying 4.5%, 5.5%, 6% cap rates. Because they're saying, look, I've got so much cash on my balance sheet. I need to move this money because I'm losing every day it's sitting in my balance sheet. I'm losing to inflation. Every day I lose money that it's sitting there. So I'm willing, because there's so much money out there right now, we're seeing what's called cap rate compression. It's coming down. It's getting lower and lower and lower. And that means that people are willing to take a lower rate of return. In order to take a lower rate of return, they pay more money for the thing I want to sell them, right? They want to pay more money, and I'm willing to sell it to them because I like money, right? And I like to not lose money, right? People with $100 million, they want to make money, but more importantly, they don't want to lose it. So they're willing to pay and get lower rates of return to outpace inflation than to have it sit in their bank and lose it to inflation month after month after month, right? And so there's this balance. In addition, interest rates are crazy low. I mean, crazy low. It's effectively free money. It's not literally 0%. And when you get into yield maintenance and all this other kind of stuff that we won't get into, you'll realize that the absolute best lenders in the entire world are insurance companies, not banks, insurance companies on long-term debt. We work with insurance companies. They're doing 2.75% rate of return on long-term debt right now. I mean, that's the interest rate that they're charging us for their money. But we've got to guarantee a 10% cash flow. I mean, a 10-year cash flow and lock it into all of these numbers because they're looking at a yield spread between the premiums they get from all of us who buy insurance, right? We give them all premiums every month, and they got to do something with it, right? And so anyway, here's the reason why, Marie. So if this is making this much money and the general cap rate out there is 7%, then the value of this property is 1.39 million, 1.4 million. That's the value of the property. That's what the appraiser is going to find it at. Therefore, that's what the bank is going to land on it. So if they've got it listed for $1 million and I'm trying to get it for 700, right? Because that's what I want, right? Because that's what I'm saying. And look, I said I wanted 10% rate of return. If I bought it for $1 million, I'd be okay, right? So let's say I buy it for $1 million. I get $97,000. I'm like, sweet, that's fine with me, right? I didn't get my exact 10%, but I got 9.75, which is funny because that's the exact number I need if I'm doing 100% financing on a deal. I need 9.75% cap rate. That's what I need in order for everything else to match. So I didn't actually plan it out this way. That's funny. That's what it worked out to be. Anyway, so I buy it for $1 million, but it's worth $1.4 million, right? I mean, I don't know about you, but that's a $400,000 valuation swing day one. And it's the same question in real estate. Why would somebody sell it for that? Because they want to sell it, and I want to buy it, and that's what I offered. And they said okay. And maybe they're ignorant, maybe they're not. Maybe they like me. I mean, I had people sell me houses all the time because they liked me. It's good to be likable, right? I mean, it's better to be likable than not likable, I guess. I don't know, right? So here's the way that this works. let's say I borrow, say I borrow 75% loan to value on this thing, right? And it appraises for this, right? So that's my loan right there. My loan is $1,044,000, right? That's my loan, but my purchase price is $1 million. Well, sometimes a bank will actually lend you the entire purchase price, but you have to have a little bit of extra kicker in there. And what we've done a lot is we give them a little bit more collateral in another facility, and they'll go ahead and they'll give us the entire purchase price, right? So we bought, I want to say we've purchased, probably $15 million in self-storage facilities in the last 3 years. It doesn't include the ground up build that we're doing, and we're doing a Sears conversion in Ohio, and we've got 6 more in the pipeline right now. So that's about what we purchased. And I want to say we've got $170,000 of our own cash in the deal, right? $15 million, we've got $170,000 in cash, of our own cash. That's not a bad deal, right? It doesn't suck, right? I mean, in the world of things that suck, that doesn't suck, right? So the reality is understanding the fact that there's money out there, that there's reasons that people will do that. Structured correctly, banks will absolutely do 100% financing, and they would finance this deal at 100%, right? If we gave them another maybe $300,000 in collateral from another facility that they already had loan on. Okay. And so you might like, hey, how are we going to get that extra $300,000? I'm glad you asked. So we're going to come over here to this increased value, right? And this is a big deal. So I'm going to come down here. I switched tabs, Marie. Same tab, same numbers, same expense. Okay. So this is a 300 unit facility. All right. I want you to think about this from your own personal life experiences. I bought this for $1 million, right? It's worth $1.4 million, but I bought it for $1 million because I'm a good negotiator, because I learned how to find out what people want, because I learned how to help meet their needs, because I learned how to put in the offers that say, hey, here's what I'm offering you based on helping you get what you want to get. Like, I learned all of those things, right? 300 units. Over the next 12 months, if I increase the rents by $15 a unit, okay, that's what I'm going to do. Most people, let's say it's an $80 a month rental, right? And I'm going to bump it to $95 over the next 12 months, right? That's what I'm going to bump it little by little. Maybe $5 in 4 months, $5 in 8 months, and another $5 in 12 months, right? Something like that. What that does is it increases the net operating income by $54,000, right? $15 times 300, right, is $4,500 a month. That's a pay raise, right? If I bump it up by 15 bucks, I get a $4,500 a month pay raise, right? That doesn't suck. Like, that's another one of those things that doesn't suck, but that's not where the value is. And times 12 months is $54,000, right? That's what it is. I bumped it by $15. People aren't going to move for $15. They don't. As a matter of fact, we understand what the metrics are. People will stay pretty much in that deal as long as you're not more than 35% above the market rate. So if we got competitors that are renting it for $100 a month and we're at 125, they'll stay with us because it's such a huge pain in the ass to move. They won't. They're like, I'm not getting it for 25 bucks a month. I'm not going to spend a weekend moving all that crap that I should throw away anyway. I'm going to leave it there and I'm going to pay an extra $300 a year. This is the reality of the customers that we deal with, right? So $54,000 is that's a good pay raise, right? But that's not where the value is. Remember what I said? This is a 7 cap, right? So what I do is I take this number divided by the 7 cap, and that increases the value by $700,000. My facility increases by $750,000 because I bump rents $15 because people are too lazy to go throw their crap away or move for another place. Right? That is massive value, right? So I do that. Next year I go to the bank and say, hey, it's no longer worth 1.4 million. It's now worth 2.1 million. And they're like, yeah, man, you did a great job. Good job. Good job. Attaboy. I'm like, yeah, good job. I said, but you know what? I want some value for that. I don't want you to, don't give me the cash. I don't need the cash. But I got this other great deal. It's just like this one. Matter of fact, it's down the street from this one. I need $1 million. Like, well, how much are you going to come up with? I said, I'm not going to come up with anything because I want you to give me value of this $700,000 I just increased it by. He said, well, we can only give you 65% of that value. I said, well, how much is 65% of that number? Well, that's $500,000. I said, great. Give me $500,000 value. Well, how much is this other deal worth? Well, this deal's worth $1 million. How much are you buying it for? I'm buying it for $1 million. Well, okay, we'll give you $1.4 million and $500,000 from this other place. That's $1.9 million. We're going to lend you $1 million. So you got almost a 50% loan to value. Yeah, we'll do that. And they'll do it again and again and again, year after year after year. We can buy facilities all the time with no money down, right? Because we started and we added the value and we moved this, okay? So you asked me why? I said for $15, I can have an unlimited amount of self-storage facilities, right? And that's on a 300 unit facility. And this is not a big facility. This would be a small facility. This would be like, this type of facility would probably be like, this times 120. This would be like a 36,000 net rentable square foot facility. So it's not a huge facility. It's kind of small. Big players, A-level players, and the REITs, they won't even play in this market. It's just way too small for them. When we work with people, they're like, guy, if I can't write you a $25 million check, I don't want to work with you. They just have too much money. It's not even worth their time to mess around with us, right? And here's the reality is because I think too small, I'm not able to help them invest because I'm not big enough to be of value to them. That's my failure, not theirs, my failure, right? And I decided that in 2015. And in 2015, I could barely think about moving $6 million. I mean, as a rehabber, as a my systems, I could maybe do 6 million. That would have been stretching me. 10, no way. Couldn't do it at all, right? Right? I had to grow. I had to change. I had to realize that if I'm going to do anything of value or substance or size, I'm not going to do it alone. I'm going to do it on a team. And that's when I started to really build a team, right? Started to really look at building a team, looked at realizing that if the reason that I'm not able to be of any size to help the people that are out there, it's because I'm the one in my own way. I'm the one that's the problem. So when I took ownership of that and I started to change my mindset, started to grow, started to realize that I can't be the visionary of the company. I can't be the integrator, the person who gets all the systems and processes down. I can't be the CFO. I can't be the CEO. I can't be the COO. I can't be the acquisition team. I can't be the fulfillment team, the contractor negotiator. I can't do all of that and grow an entire business. I can't do that alone, right? So I started to kind of build a business and bring on different partners and do that. And so we're at today is we're continuing to grow. We're at about 300,000 net rentable square feet. We'll probably be at about 650 to 850,000 net rentable square feet by the end of the year. So we'll over double in size this year, and we'll be at over 7 million in the next 9 years, right? It's a big number, right? 7 million net rentable square feet is a huge number. That would be the top 20 operators in the country. And that's our vision, right? That's what it is. That's the numbers behind the goal, right? The real goal is to impact 100,000 people, positively impact them in the communities in which we work, in which we live. And that's not the customers. That's the battered women's shelters. That's the police departments. That's the schools. By donating money and donating space, right? We work with an at-risk youth boxing club, right? In one of the communities in which we have a facility. We give them a free space, right? It's great for them. They need it. And it helps them in their mission to help keep kids off the street and give them, you know, some skills and a place to, you know, to vent their aggression and that kind of stuff. And, you know, we look at that. That's a critical part. Like, that's why we do what we do. We don't do it so that we can go buy another facility. Yeah, we do it because that's going to be great for retirement and all that fun stuff, and it makes good money and blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, it's just numbers. And if that's all you're doing is numbers on a spreadsheet, you know, you've lost the value of why you're alive. And so for us, it's positively impacting those communities. And so we do donate time, we donate money, we donate space to that. And as a person in your company, you get to decide that. You get to decide what you're doing. And if it's just you or just two of you or three of you, right? That's perfect. That's fine, right? Get involved. Like, find out what's important to you and then do that. And then you'll find that there's value and reason behind what you're doing. So this is a question I get asked often. Like, so this makes sense, right? Like, all of this makes sense. So on 300 units, we're going to do this. Okay. So if I had a multifamily facility and I wanted to increase the NOI by $54,000, right? So that might be, well, I mean, you don't really typically raise rents during the year, right? You got year contracts and leases and that kind of stuff. But let's say you could do that. And let's say you could bump the facility. Let's say you could bump the rents by $100. All right. Let's just say it's $100, right? So 100, so that'd be $1,200, right, a year, which is a lot, right? So if I said we're going to bump rents by $1,200, right, a year, and divided by that, take that divided by $1,200, I need to have a 45 unit facility, right? I need a 45 unit multifamily property, okay? In order to get $54,000, I need to have 45 units. 45 units times 100 a month is $54,000. That's what that turns out to be. So the question is, how much does a 45 unit multifamily complex cost in your area, right? So in our area, typically these are running at about $65,000 a unit, right? That's $3 million. $3 million I would have to spend to get a revenue stream that would allow me to increase the rents by $100 to get my $54,000. Or in my example, I spend $1 million. So this is what we call return on assets. Like the ROA with the return on the asset here, right, in a multifamily is 1/3 of the ROA on self-storage. Right? And depending on the area, and I would imagine in your area, it's going to be more like $6 million, right? I mean, I don't know what multifamilies are running in your area like that, but what it is, but you're going to run it, you know, maybe it's not quite 6, but maybe it's, you know, maybe it's 4 or 5 million.
It's anywhere between 150 to 175 a unit.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So let's say 150, right? So that's $7 million. So what we're saying is that for $1 million acquisition, I get the opportunity to increase the values, right, of $54,000, right? Or for $7 million, I get the opportunity to increase the value by $54,000. So the return on assets in the self-storage industry is significantly higher than the return on assets in a multifamily, right?
Guy, can I ask you how, what's your occupancy, I guess,
Sure.
on your self-storage? Are they always 100% occupied,
No,
your units? That's typical.
Well, let me tell you, if it's 100%, we raise our prices. We raise our prices and we keep raising our prices until the market says, whoa, 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 you are way too high. Right? And if we aren't at 85%, then we got to figure out what the heck is going on. Right? Either we got a bad manager, we got a bad location, we got a bad reputation, our prices are wrong, like, you know, like there's something wrong there, right? So your question was, Marie, what's the percent, right? And what we want to be is we want to be between 85 and 92%, right? That's what we want to be. Right? So when you start to look at things and say, what's my optimal occupancy, right? And occupancy is the price to occupancy ratio, right? I can have 100% occupancy at $10 a month. I can also have 100% occupancy at $20 a month, right? So I could have 100% occupancy at $30 a month, right? So when you start to look at that, you're like, at some point in time, you start getting away from 100% occupancy, right? And it turns out to be that there's this 85 to 92% occupancy rate. That's what we look at. And so when the facility is below 85%, so let's pretend it's a stabilized property. We bought it, it's kind of at 95% already. We increase prices, we make some changes, we lose a lot of people because it turns out we actually start charging late fees, right? We actually start, you know, managing this like as a professional company and all that kind of stuff. People don't like them accountable to actually having to pay their bills on time sometimes, right? So anyway, people move out for all kinds of reasons, but we know that we have the good pricing mix when we have a constant ratio of kind of we'll call it reservations to or website impacts, like, you know, visits to booking to actual completion, right? When you have a lot of constant flow at your website and you got a constant flow of people coming in or phone calls coming in and people are saying, hey, how much are you? We're like, hey, we're 110 bucks. Like, right, thanks. But you're not renting anything. So you have a lot of traffic, but you have no rentals. Then you know your price is too high. And that, because that's what they're doing. They're like, hey, they're just calling around. They're like, boom, 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 right? So you know what we learned? When the phone rings, answer the phone, right? Like I told you before, right? When the phone rings, answer it, right? It's a money call, right? It's like, hey, I want to give you money, answer the phone, right? Same kind of concept here. So we know that we're incorrectly priced when we get a lot of calls and we don't get any bookings. So we always have to ask ourselves, what changed? You know what changed? John changed. John went out there and built a brand new facility down the street, damn it, right? He's got a fully blown Class A facility, climate controlled, that kicks the heck out of our facility. And in order to get his ramped up, he's cut his prices in the third, bastard, right? You know what I mean? But I mean, because they've got, you know, $12 million in that facility and they need cash flow because they need to get to break even quick, right? So they've got zero occupancy. They'll rent it at any price, right? Because they need to get it moving. So when you see new facilities, especially Class A brand new facilities come on the market in your area, you got to know it's going to be a price war for kind of 18 months in that range. That's what's going to happen. Bam, 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 bam. Mm-hmm. So what you do is you go out and you talk to your people. And you say, hey, want to thank everybody for being a long-term loyal customer. We're going to give you a $20 price reduction for the next 6 months. Just want to say thank you and let us know if there's anything else that's going on, right? So you need to preemptively go out there and deal with that. And once they see, oh, hey, there's this other place, oh well, they called me, and get a little bit of concept of brand loyalty, or again, they don't want to move, even though they could save some, but you drop your price, so yeah, okay, right? That kind of a deal. especially if you're 20% above market anyway. Right? So you got to be aware, right? You have to be aware of what's going on in your market. Which is
All right,
tough. 'cause
another question
yeah.
I had for you was related to the insurance company loans that you mentioned before. So as opposed to, I guess, going to a bank, how are you approaching, or how did you set up those relationships with?
So we're too small with that, right? So we work directly with brokers, right? We work with brokers. Brokers work with insurance companies, right? We just we don't have enough volume for them, right? So there's all kinds of brokers all over the country, and that's what they do, right? And it's called CMBS loans, commercial. I forget what the MBS is about. Anyway, so it's their commercial mortgage brokerage services or something like that. Anyway, they're very they're very stringent. They've got massive prepayment penalties. They're basically saying, hey, you're going to pay us this much interest over this period of time, whether you have the loan or not. Right? So this is a 10-year loan. It's 2.5%, or it's 3%. You got $5 million at 3% over 10 years. That's you're gonna pay us that much interest, right? You're gonna pay us $150,000 in interest or whatever it is, right? Per year, so $750,000 in interest. And if you come back a year later and say, hey, I want to refinance out, they're like, great, you owe us $600,000. I mean, that's what the note is, right? That's your prepayment penalty, it's $600,000. Well, if somebody wants to pay me $15 million for a $5 million facility, I'll pay the $600,000, right? I mean, I would do it, but I mean, that's a huge pill to swallow, right? So you got to know that if you get into some of these kind of like bigger loans, and they want bigger numbers. Like 5 million really is kind of, 2 million is really their lowest numbers, especially if you're going to do like a cash out refinance. They don't want to be below 2 million, but 5 million is kind of like the minimum broker sweet spot. You got to know that there's massive money out there. So, but I can get you numbers of people who do that. I can connect you with people like that. But again, this is a long-term. You're not going to mess with the notes. You're basically guaranteeing them a cash flow stream that they're doing like what's called a credit swap. They're swapping out the debt, right? and they're just locking in this cash flow stream. And they need that because they need to offset against the cash that they're required to carry on their balance sheet. They have to carry it on their balance sheet per the insurance regulations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So we're approaching our almost, time to go. So I do want everybody to unmute if you have questions. Vali, I saw that you typed something in the chat, but why don't you just unmute yourself and go ahead and ask Guy and let everybody have a second to ask. Vali, you have not unmuted yourself. There you go.
That's because my daughter was next to me with her iPad blaring. And so I was like, okay, you got to mute yours for a second.
Sure.
So yeah, my question was, do you have management on site for your facilities, or do you just do the tenant self electronic access and have somebody available then when things happen or need to address something?
Yes, yes, and yes, and no, and no, and no. Yeah. So the answer is yes. So in some of our facilities, we have a self-storage manager, and so we'll just Carrie is one. I'll just say she's managing this facility, and we're buying another facility down the road. So that'll be great because it's going to take it from 200 units to 350 units, right? So that's going to give her more time to do that. But she needs more of a full-time job, but it's not a full-time job, right? So what we have her do is we have her remote manage another facility, right? So she takes the phone calls for that facility. She enters in all of the data into the facility management software package. She has that relationship. She gets them moved in. They're like, well, hey, how do I get the lock? How do I sign all of these other things? So we have electronic signatures we can do and all this other kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, we have what we call the boots on the ground, right? Also called the chief pretty officer, right? Because that chief pretty officer is responsible at that facility, who comes around a couple times a week, and they pick up the trash, they put locks on all of the doors where people don't pay us, right? Which, by the way, I love. Like, as a landlord, when people don't pay me, it's a huge pain in the butt. But as a self-storage owner, when people don't pay me, I just lock them out. And if they don't pay me in 60 days, then I sell their stuff. It's not worth anything anyway, but at least I move them out and I get somebody in who's willing to pay me, right? And instead of being $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 indebted, right, upside down with them in a landlord position, I'm what, $800 maybe? You know, if it was a really bad scenario and we were out many, many times and it took us, you know, a dumpster or something like that to get rid of them, it might be $800. It's a big, big, big difference between the two. So we have remote management. Some of our facilities are gated. Some of them are not. We typically want to increase the lighting. We want to increase the camera coverage, right? We'll buy facilities and they have fake cameras. They're like, yeah, we just want people to think that, you know, if they're going to do something wrong, that they're going to be, you know, that they're going to be caught, right? As opposed to going and paying the, you know, the $1,200 to actually put real cameras in. Let's not do that. Let's go put fake cameras in. Well, here's the deal. When you put fake cameras up there, yeah, you think that you're talking to only the potential criminals. You're not. You're talking to your actual customers, and you're telling your customers, hey, this is a camera site. It's got cameras on it. And when they like, hey, I'm renting from you because you've got cameras, and you're like, great. And it turns out you don't, you get sued and you lose. And God forbid that there was a crime that happened and somebody got hurt, right? Like, you know, somebody got attacked or assaulted because you didn't have good lighting and you didn't have real cameras. I mean, we just can't, I mean, just from a real moral standpoint, where I'm at is we have to increase lighting. We have to have cameras on there. I want to catch criminals. I want to be part of the solution for the police if there's a problem, right? I want to be that. And from a business perspective, depending on the areas, but about 70% of self-storage renters are female. It's just kind of a general standard. They're female. And when you
Ladies, I think we buy too much stuff.
I was gonna say, we have a lot of,
It's because they have so much baggage.
Now we run away and we have to store stuff away.
It's
Yeah,
a place
yeah.
for our shoes, Rob.
right,
Our shoes.
handbags and
Oh,
stuff.
I thought it was because all the baggage women have.
Yeah.
I mean, bags, handbags is what I
Bags.
meant.
Handbags.
Yeah.
Handbags, yes. Safety and security is one of the major decision factors for a woman, right? Test after test, after survey after survey, right? So if you're in the back alleys of an industrial park, even if it's around the corner, she's not coming. Even if you're the most well-lit area, she's got to drive through this potential criminal aspect, right? It's going to be a problem. So knowing your customer decision-making process is a big deal, right? You need to know that. And we didn't know that. Like, just so you know, we started in August of 2018 doing self-storage, right? 3 years, not even 3 years yet, right? Because I'm so awesome and wonderful and I'm you know, no, right? I mean, like you got to understand that like we have learned so much in these last 3 years. Like we didn't know, like all of the questions you asked, everything I told you today, I didn't know 3 years ago. But what we knew how to do is we knew how to execute. Do it. We'll figure it out. We have supreme confidence in our ability to figure stuff out, right? We have lost enough money and earned enough education through those losses that we know how to not do that again, right? I mean, that's the truth. So, I want to just encourage you, like, to understand what's your why. Like, why do you do what you do every day, right? And it's got to be for you. It can't be for everyone else around you. And as long as it's yours, keep it yourself. Be the thing that gets you up out of every day. Change your level of association. When we joined Collective Genius, and we upped our game, right? We're working with people who are doing some serious business, right? And so, change our level of association. We learned a lot from them. We're able to teach, and train and help and be of value and service in that group as well. Do that yourself. Educate yourself. Read a book, right? Read a book every month on a subject that's specific to your industry. If you're doing flipping, read a book every month on flipping houses, right? Join an association, get periodicals, right? And if it's periodicals, read one a week, right? You will be the most educated person in the room simply because you're educating yourself. Take that education and implement it, right? At some point in time, you've got too much information because you haven't done enough action, right? Once you do enough action, then you'll realize, man, I need some more information, right? Right? Too much education. I just tell you from a coach, like somebody who's too educated, right? It's because they're afraid. Too much education, that's fear, right?
Stop learning, Rochelle. Implement. Implement. I see that smile over there.
Speaking right to me. I'm
Rob,
waiting
Oh,
for
are you?
Rob to-
Okay.
I'm waiting for the eye roll. Guy, this has been so amazing and so valuable. I wanted to ask you if you had like 3 to 5 things to say, like to get started to, I've been so interested in self-storage for a while and I kind of put it on the back burner because I wanted to make sure I wasn't getting distracted, and shiny squirrel syndrome. But what would be those 3 to 5 things to
Not learn, but do.
Well, so let me just, so when we got into self-storage, what ends up happening is you move the decimal point over 1, right? So like our wholesale fees, like our biggest wholesale fee is $275,000,
Mm,
right? That's a huge wholesale fee,
yep.
right? We're locking up a facility here close to another one, and we'll get a $200 wholesale fee on that.
Mm.
We buy it ourselves because we'll sell it into another company we own, and we'll pay our own wholesale fee to ourselves,
Wow.
but the bank will land on the entire purchase price.
Wow.
Right? And if we wholesale it out to somebody else, we'll get a $300,000 wholesale fee.
Hmm.
Right? So the decision making for us is, do we need the cash flow or do we want the equity growth? Like it's cash flow versus equity growth. And when you're growing a company, especially at the speed that we're doing, you either do it with ops, with equity investors in your company, right? That's the only way you're going to do it. People, unless you've got your own cash, right? You could have like a war chest as well. But in general, those are the 3 ways that you grow a company, because you run out of money. You always run out of money. It just is the way it happens. Of course, I mean, depends on your process, but in general, that's what happens. So, so here's the thing with again, wants to do self-storage. I'll just tell you, think of it this way. You're buying a Subway restaurant. Do you want to work at Subway every day?
No.
No. Right? Okay. So you got to realize you're not going to work there every day. Now, if you want to work there every day, you got to realize you're buying a Subway restaurant. You need to have a customer interface. You need to have a point system. You need to have a marketing campaign. You need to be able to have customer feedback and surveys. You need to be able to deal with Facebook responses, with Yelp, with all the positive and negative feedback that comes out there. You need to have a pricing strategy. You need to have the ability to go out and do customer checks. You need to have secret shopper checks for your own systems and processes, right? You have to have these things. Like you have a system that you need to put into place, right? It's not the same thing as when you go and buy a house and you fix it up and then you're going to rent it, because you get one renter and they sign a year lease and then you've got some maintenance stuff that happens, right? That's what happens. So you got to realize you're buying a business, right? The business is once you realize that, then you get to decide, hey, what's my realistic returns here, right? Go to the association meetings, like every state. So there's a national association, National Self-Storage Association. We're a member of that. We're a member of each of the state associations that we're part of. So we're in 6 different states. We'll be in 7, 8, 9 states by July, right? So we're in our own the associations. That's very valuable to us. The reason we're in so many states is because we're looking for motivated sellers. That's all we know how to do is look for motivated sellers, right? There's 45,000 self-storage facilities in the country, which means there's only 45,000 potential sellers. That's it, right? So like, how do I find the motivated sellers? You market for it. Same way, we bought a list. We would scrub the list. We send out marketing to them. We call them, same thing that we do in looking for houses, we do for self-storage facilities, right? Same exact thing, right? So the thing that you get to decide is, what do you want to accomplish? If you're looking for cash flow, right, then that's one aspect, right? If you're looking for equity growth, like what we like, right? Equity growth is a big deal for us, because like we're going to take 4 of our facilities and sell them off into a fund that we own. We're going to maintain 50% ownership of it, but it's going to let us pull out like $1.7 million in equity, right? So it's going to go into our pockets, so we can go ahead and continue to grow our business, right? So there's a process for that. So all I'm saying is that you get to decide what you're looking for. You're going to get one or the other. You're not going to get both, right? Just to start with. Realize that you need to act. You need to actually go do it, right? There's a number of companies around the country that can help with the education aspect. There's a company called Tracti, Tracti, how do I spell it? Let me just look it up real quick. They've got some good training, but they also sell their it's TRACHTE building systems. They sell their systems, right? But in order to sell their systems, they educate people, right? And they've got education in person as well as webinars, every month on different things. I talked to John. John's in your backyard, right? Go to dinner with John and say, hey, what don't we know that we don't know, right? But at the end of the day, it's really, 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 really simple. It's buying it, having the right leverage, and then making sure that it gets managed right. I mean, if you basically, if your facility manager can smile and add, you're good, right? I mean, there's not a lot of selling. There is a little selling, but there's not a lot of selling in this. It's just a good customer service, right?
Yeah.
But then you get an entire aspect of business. Like, are they your employee, or are you have a PEO, or you've got all the employment issues and this other kind of stuff. But all of that can be handled with attorneys and be handled with third-party payroll processes and systems, and I can handle all of that. The one thing that I encourage everybody on here is, if you're doing your own books, stop it. I mean, unless you're a CPA, but don't do it. Right? It's a waste of your time. It's not adding any money to your pocket, but it's taking a massive amount of time at it. You're not good at it. It drives you crazy, and it's taking your time. So you suck at it. You don't like it, and it's wasting your time. So let's continue to do that, so I don't pay $25 an hour to somebody else who's really good at it, really likes it, and it's going to make it happen really well for me. Yeah, that's a bad decision-making model.
Yeah, that was one of the biggest things, I think, when we talked at Ignite. At one point, you were talking about the, certain things to look for. And one of them was definitely the bookkeeping. And I have hired a full-time bookkeeper, well, full-time for my purposes. She's
Right.
not full-time on just me, but
Right.
and I think the thing that I appreciated most about that conversation was you were saying, higher up if you're going to hire an assistant, do you necessarily want a virtual assistant that you have to teach everything to? Or do you want maybe someone who has 40 years of experience, is semi-retired, knows more than you do, and actually tells you how they should do their job rather than you try and train them? And, just that concept of hiring up and, and that's why I'm paying a bookkeeper a lot more than I wanted to pay a bookkeeper, but because she tells me, well, Marie, did you think about this, this, and this? And I'm like, oh, no, I didn't.
No.
Explain that to me. What should I be doing? And that's just been a huge stress release, relief of just not having to deal with that anymore. And so anyway, I just wanted to bring up that, I'll never forget when you were just like, Marie, hire up. Don't hire a virtual assistant. Find the lady that has 40 years of experience. She loves being an office manager and she loves, what she does. And she actually comes and she teaches you what she should do.
Exactly.
So.
Awesome.
I have a question, if you don't mind, real quick.
Yeah.
For any of those units that, past 3 months without any payments that you've had to empty it out and sell their items, do you arrange for auctions, storage
Right.
unit auctions? Or
Yeah.
how do you empty them out?
Yeah, so each state has their own requirements, right? And so part of the reason that we're part of the self-storage associations in every state is because they know what the requirements are in the state, right? There's specific requirements. So you have to do notification, you have to do a process, you have to put stuff in the newspapers. Some of them pretty much you have to do, hey, we're going to do this in the newspaper. You have to do it in the next week's newspaper. There's a process for that. But typically today, in our environment, it's all online. All of the auctions are online, right? And so what it is we put in a $5 bid on the auction, right? Because one of the real questions is whether or not there was a true group of people that had the opportunity to bid, right? And so if you have an auction at your site and you didn't do the newspaper, but you told some friends and the only people that were there were the owners and the owners' friends, then it wasn't really a true auction. So you didn't really comply, right? And so when it's an online auction, the potential buyers are about 7 billion, right? It's the entire world that can bid on that, right? Now, literally, they're not going to, because you're not going to have people from across the world bidding on, oh, look at this picture of a box that might have something in it, right? Kind of a deal. But you got to know that auctions are a loss leader. You will always lose money because you can only make as much as they owe you or less. If you make more, typically every state has a requirement that you give that money back to the tenant. And if you don't have that address, you give it to the state fund. And the state has, like Iowa has called the Great Iowa Treasure Hunt, right? So I go out and I type in my name. I'm like, oh my gosh, I got $12.10 from an insurance company 15 years ago. Forgot to, I didn't cash the check, right? That kind of deal, right? So typically you don't get to keep it. Unbelievably though, in Illinois, you do. After a year, if you've made good faith effort to try and connect with them and they haven't connected with you, then you got to keep their money. But again, you just got to know, like storage wars, it's not real, right? That's not what's going on, right? So you're not going to be, it's not a money maker. It's just the speed of transition, right?
All right, guys, one last question, because I got to go put my kiddos to bed. We're
Right.
officially over time. So anybody got anything they want to ask before we go?
When can I come out and see you, Guy?
Well, you can
Are we planning another road trip, Rochelle? I'm coming.
Yeah.
We went to Kalamazoo, Michigan. Well, why not?
Oh yeah. So hey, like seriously, if you guys, if self-storage is something that you're interested in, I'm willing to share some time with you and kind of give you some models and some ideas and thoughts, and we can do that, right? We don't have any problem doing that. Kind of teach you what we do and share, like this is everything we do. So you're not going to do more than that. Right. So what I'm going to do for you is I'm going to define the box. Like now, you know, this is everything inside the box. So now you don't have to go get more educated because you're always wondering if there's stuff outside the box, but there's nothing outside the box, right? Yeah. So you can, Marie, you can share my personal information with everyone in the group if you want. That's fine.
Thank you so much for all this information. It's so cool. I don't know if everyone else is all excited, but I'm excited. I don't know.
Excited.
I get so excited over self-storage.
Yeah, it's good.
Well, I think back before, pre-COVID, and John Badura actually did a tour of one of his facilities here locally, and then came back to Tapestry and started going over some of his numbers and stuff. And he was like, his main reason for going into self-storage was that he didn't have to deal with people. He was like, I don't have to deal with bodies, maybe a dead body if somebody put it in the storage unit. But other than that, I don't have to deal with real live people complaining. It was actually really funny. But anyway, Guy, I really appreciate it. I always find it, inspiring, enlightening. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. I mean, for you guys that don't know, I literally called Guy a couple weeks ago, and I think we spent like almost 2 hours on the phone on like a random Saturday, where I was just like, yeah, I got a couple questions. And he was like, sure, I got some time. And all of a sudden I looked at the phone, I was like, holy crow, we just spent like 2 hours on the phone. So he's awesome. Anyone who does want his contact information, just let me know. And I really, really appreciate it, Guy.
Yep, you're welcome.
Awesome.
Love claps for everyone. All right, get some rest. I'm going to put my kiddos to bed.
Sure.
Thanks
All
so
right.
much.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marie, again for an awesome one. This was awesome. I'm all excited. I don't know how I'm gonna sleep tonight now. Guy, I'm gonna be calling you. I'm just warning you.
Okay, good.
She's gonna be on LoopNet looking at self-storage facilities. Anything
Now
for
I know what
sale.
I'm doing for Thursday now.
If you have that road trip to visit Guy, are you in Chicago?
I'm in Iowa.
Iowa.
Well, I'm closer to you because I'm in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
If you come on a road trip, let me know. I'll meet
We'll
you.
swing by and pick you